All right, Nick, let's talk about the Chicago Bears at this point. Everyone in the world knows that Matt Eberflus has been fired. They also know that newly, brought up through the ranks very quickly as well. Thomas Brown is the interim head coach for the Chicago Bears. Think this was a really interesting head coaching change move here. I think there's a little bit more depth to it than people could think. But before we get on to that, I'm Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. All right, Nick, I pretty much covered it in the beginning from, the basics here. Let's jump on into the article, and I want you to dive in on your thoughts on this on the other side. This, of course, is over from NBC Sports. It says, Matt Eberflus is out, and one coach has received another in-season promotion to replace him. Thomas Brown will serve as the Bears' interim head coach after Eberflus' firing on Friday. According to multiple reports, Brown, 38, joined the Bears in the offseason as a passing game coordinator and was promoted to offensive coordinator after the club fired Shane Waldron from that position earlier this month. That's pretty crazy if you ask me, going from in 1 year passing game coordinator to offensive coordinator to now interim head coach. Great for him. I think he's doing a lot of really good things. Curious what your thoughts are on this one, Nick. But before we get to you, Bears fans, in the comment section below, team has been freed. Eberflus is gone. I think we all knew this was going to happen a little while ago. We were just waiting to see if things would change with the new quarterback. It didn't. I think they would change with the new offensive coordinator. That didn't help either. I think Eberflus was a big problem, as we saw in last week's game. But let us know. Now you have a decision to make. Who do you want to be the next head coach of the Bears? Is Thomas Brown the guy? Is there some big name floating out there? Is Bill Belichick the guy? Is that who you want? Or is there some, young up-and-coming coordinator from a different team that you're wanting? Let us know what your thoughts on the new head coach position should be are in the comment section below. But nonetheless, Nick, what do you think about all of this for the Bears?
Yeah, you kind of hit on it, right? It's sort of a massive shift in Thomas Brown's responsibility. This guy has spent, prior to this year, 1 year as an offensive coordinator. Now, in a matter of weeks, he goes from passing game coordinator all the way up to interim head coach. That's obviously a big burden to put on a guy. But I think the Bears are doing here is something you see a lot in organizations. Coming from corporate America, I've seen this a number of times where you've got a young, hotshot, talented guy, and upper management doesn't know how good they really are. Are they good at their current role, or are they a superstar that could rise really fast through the ranks? So what upper management and big companies will tend to do is they'll just throw all kinds of crap on this young guy, and they'll put him in a sink or swim situation. If he sinks, hey, he's fine. He's just not ready for the big leagues yet. But if he swims and does great, they're like, okay, this is our guy. And I think that's what the Bears are doing with Thomas Brown. They're throwing so much on him, right? Obviously, moving to offensive coordinator after firing Waldron, two really nice performances with Caleb Williams. At that point, you would think Bears would leave that alone, let Williams develop. Right here, they're sitting there saying, no, we want to put Thomas Brown as the interim head coach, give him the head coach responsibilities that go with game planning, in-game decision-making, dealing with the media, things like that, on top of his offensive coordinator duties. They're basically throwing the kitchen sink at Thomas Brown and saying, listen, how good are you, man? And I think it's a good strategy. Sometimes with these interim head coaches, especially if it's a younger guy, you throw them in there and they relieve him of maybe play calling duty, they relieve him of some of their coaching duties, and an interim head coach will sometimes do well, but you really don't know how good they actually are in terms of leading a team long term. I look back at an example of, I think, about a decade ago when the Dallas Cowboys fired head coach Wade Phillips in 2010 midseason. They promoted Jason Garrett. I know everyone sees him on NBC Sports now, but he was a guy that had a nice run at the end of that season, got promoted to be the head coach. But reality was he just wasn't suited to be the head coach candidate. And when he became the interim head coach, they took some of his play calling duties away from him. They made things simple. Cowboys had an easier schedule. They won some games and people thought he was really good, when in reality, he wasn't. The Bears are doing the smart thing here. They're keeping a lot of stress on Thomas Brown to see how good and how well, he can handle the situation. And look, if he crushes it, he's a candidate for the head coaching job. If he doesn't, no harm, no foul. He's still obviously a quality offensive coordinator. But there's another part to this as well. The Bears, I think, going into this offseason, they're done hiring a defensive-minded guy. They're probably looking for a young, hot-shot offensive coordinator to promote to head coach to work with Caleb Williams. People throw a name like Ben Johnson from the Lions around, for example. So why does promoting Thomas Brown to the interim head coach make sense for that responsibility? When they interview candidates, they're going to want to ask them questions, right? This happens in corporate America too. Hey, this happened to us last year. How would you handle this? How would you handle what we faced in week 14 when, let's say, the Bears are down 2 left tackles? Hey, what did you do game plan wise? And let's say they're interviewing Ben Johnson of the Lions. They will compare what Ben Johnson did to what Brown's going to do, or what Brown did in this case, looking out in the future. And they will sit there and say, okay, if he answers exactly the same as Brown does, and Brown's decision was terrible, maybe Ben Johnson isn't our guy. Or if he answers differently, and you're like, okay, he is smart, he's the guy that we really want to be, right? You're trying to develop a compare and contrast scenario for future interviews. I know this is really deep in the weeds, kind of corporate strategy kind of stuff here for all the football fans out there. But trust me, this stuff is really important. And I think the Bears here are making a really smart move, promoting Brown to be the interim head coach for the two reasons I outlined.
Yeah, Nick, and I think you're absolutely right, and especially a guy like Brown. Let's compare. I'll take the two that you brought up, Brown versus a guy like Ben Johnson. What's the difference? Ben Johnson's also been around for like a long time. He's seen the game. He probably has better situational awareness as far as the game goes. And I think the Bears know that obviously that was a problem last week. Football decision making, making sure that clock doesn't strike midnight before you get a chance to win the game. I think that's another opportunity here for Brown to prove himself, to say, hey, like you said, you're throwing a bunch of crap on him at one point in time. Can he handle the direction of the offense? Can he handle in-game stuff? Is he going to be too focused on the offense? Like, is he going to be a true head coach? Is he going to take control of the macro? Is he going to focus on the micro? Is he going to be too involved in the minutia, or can he let someone run the offense while he runs the team? I think that's the key here with a lot of these head coaches, especially a guy like Eberflus. When you're on the verge of a team being bad, getting fired, I think they really start to dive in to too much of the micro, and they can't focus on the overarching theme of the team, like what needs to be done at the big level, game calling, timeouts, all of that, managing the key points that can win a game. I think they'll be like, oh, what do we need to do on defense? Well, let the defensive coordinator handle that. You handle running the team so we don't run into situations like we face. So I think all of this is really smart strategy by the Bears, like you said, just to test out Brown. Can he handle it? There's a couple games left in this season. We're going to get a good sample size. Is this guy able to? And I think the Bears are different, because I kind of relate this a little bit to like the Raiders with Antonio Pierce, where the Raiders were a really bad team, and I think they still are at some aspects as well. And Antonio Pierce, he was just trying to energize bad players to go out and play better. The Bears aren't a bad team per se. This is a team that has a lot of talent. They have their quarterback. They've got some good wide receivers. The offensive line has been playing a lot better. There's some good players on defense as well. Montez Sweat's a really good player. This is a team that I would say is not a bad team. So he's coming out here with a team that I feel like, if they had good coaching, if they had good schemes and stuff like that, this is a team that could challenge for their division. I think this is a team that's really talented. So I want to see what he does in the last 5 games or so of the season, because this isn't just a, hey, can you rally the troops and, put on a good rah-rah show at the end of the season? This is, hey, we're not tanking for the draft pick. We already have too many wins. We're not going to get a first overall pick anymore. Can you make this work and make it be a long-term strategy, not just a short-term couple of wins? And I think that's a really great strategy by the Bears. I'm really excited to see how it's going to play out.
Yeah, you make a great point about micro versus macro. I think Eberflus was deeply involved in defensive play calling and strategy when he should have been involved with game management and things like that, right? That obviously hurt him. I think it's big to see if Thomas Brown can handle that. I think it's big to see whatever potential hires, what they do, if they can handle that going forward. And I think you bring up an outstanding point about this is already, on paper anyway, a good Bears team. You don't need a talent maximizer. You don't need a Dan Campbell. You don't need an Antonio Pierce, a guy to just shift people that stink at football to believe they can be good and then slowly build a good football team. You need a guy that understands X's and O's. You need a guy that understands situational management. That's what the Bears need to use the rest of the season, evaluating Brown, and then the offseason to figure out who's the right guy for that. I think we're off to a strong start with this first move, and we'll see how it all shakes out.